I saw Frankenstein last night, Guillermo del Toro's version, and as I walked out of the theater, the air outside felt very different, like heavier, quieter, like something ancient in me had been touched, like the part that remembers what it feels like to be both the creator and the creation. And I first read Frankenstein in school when I was about 12 years old. And back then, I didn't even understand trauma or projection or nervous system, but I understood pain that had nowhere to go. And I remember thinking, even then, like, he wasn't a monster, he was just misunderstood. And now, years later, watching Del Toro's vision, I realized that Frankenstein is not fiction. It is a mirror. It is a mirror of what happens when a being is brought into existence without attunement, when creation happens without presence, and when love becomes conditional. Frankenstein was not born evil, he was built and then abandoned, programmed through neglect, made of human parts stitched together with genius, but not with gentleness. He was giving a nervous system, one that could feel pain, feel rejection, longing, but never thought what safety was. And so he mirrored his maker, Victor Frankenstein, the man he was consumed by ambition, obsessed with mastery, man who wanted to create life but could not love life. He made a body, but not the home. And that, to me, is the essence of trauma. A nervous system built to feel, but never taught that feeling is safe. When we are born into environments where presence is missing, our body becomes our biography. Our muscles memorize the tension of unspoken words. Our breath shortens around what is unsayable. And just like Frankenstein, we begin to confuse rejections with identity. What Del Toro does so masterfully is he reminds us that horror is not in the monster, it is in the misunderstanding. Because to be human is to be stitched together by stories, memories, and emotions that weren't all ours to carry. And yet, we walk around calling it personality. Every person I have worked with, every story of anxiety, control, shame comes down to this: a nervous system that once learned that love had to be earned. And the tragedy of Frankenstein is that he felt everything. He had veins, a heart, and a lymphatic system. He could weep, he could rage, he could love. But no one could see that, because his appearance made people forget his essence. And I wonder how many of us live like that. How many of us are still trying to prove that our softness doesn't make us weak, that our longing isn't our flaw, and that our sensitivity is our intelligence. And another beautiful thing is that Guillermo del Toro waited 50 years to tell this story. 50 years of studying not just the book, but the breath in its words. Mary Shelley, Percy, Byron, Radcliffe, he studied the romantic, not as a genre, but as a state of being. He said this story was part of him since childhood, and that he needed to grow into it before he could make it. And I think that is what makes his art so alive. It is never performed, it is ripened. 50 years! In a world addicted to immediacy, he lived in devotion. He didn't rush, he listened. He allowed time to teach him tenderness, like the kind of tenderness only experience can carve into a human being. And that is what healing has been for me. Healing has been about not fixing, not achieving, but ripening. learning to be with what once unbearable until it becomes beautiful. And I used to think that I was broken, that I needed to fix my mind to find peace. I read every book, repeated every affirmation, but my body was still whispering that you cannot think your way out of a feeling. So it wasn't until I began somatic work, like breath, movement, presence, that I realized my body was not the obstacle, it was the portal. And the nervous system wasn't my problem, it was my protector. And I started to see that I had been Frankenstein and Victor at once, and the one desperately creating a new self, and the one rejecting it when it didn't look perfect. That is what trauma does. It splits us. But healing is the slow reunion of all the selves that were left behind. And Guillermo said this, he said once that Frankenstein is about adaptation. Like he described like a fish learning to live on land. Like first it has to grow legs and like it's takes time. And isn't that what we are all doing? Learning to breathe differently in a world that often feels too harsh for sensitivity. So maybe Frankenstein was never the monster. Maybe it was the embodiment of what happens when creation is not met with compassion. And maybe Guillermo del Toro waited half a lifetime because he needed to grow enough love inside himself to tell this story truthfully. That is what art is. That is what healing is. Both require time, tenderness, and the courage to face your own shadows. So, to Guillermo, thank you for showing us that horror can be holy, that monster can be mirrors, and that sometimes it takes a lifetime to become human. And to anyone watching this, if you have ever felt misunderstood, if your sensitivity has been called weakness, if your pain has made you feel unlovable, remember this. You were never broken. You were just waiting, like Del Toro, for the right time to come alive. And until next time, stay gentle with the parts that are still learning to breathe.